talk about the strategic plan again today, and we also have some grantees from Minnesota and Oklahoma that are going to jump on the line and share their story. So this presentation will be recorded and will go out like the others do after the meeting. All participants have been muted, but if you want to talk or need to talk, you can press *6 to unmute yourself and *6 to remute. Check out the attachments pod. We've got the slides from today, and we also have the strategic planning guidance if you haven't already seen that, but likely a lot of you have. The presentation today is made possible by the Preschool Development Birth Through 5 initiative from the Office of Child Care in the Administration for Children and Families within the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and also made possible in a partnership with the Department of Education. So we are excited to have our own in-house expert, Jim Lesko, present today, and then also, as I mentioned, some grantees giving their take on some of their processes. So I will go ahead and pass it over to Jim to get us started.
Thank you so much, Sammy. Appreciate that. So welcome, everyone. Again, this is Jim Lesko with PDG B-5 Technical Assistance team, and Sammy Couture, TA manager with the team, did our introduction. So thanks, Sammy. So today we're going to have a follow-up conversation, a community of conversation around the strategic plan. Invited participants for today were all of the PDG B-5 grantees, and they are certainly more than welcome to be including their partners and their consultants. The PDG B-5 Technical Assistance team is on the line today along with you all. We have extended invitations to the federal project officers and regional office representatives that are a part of the PDG B-5 effort, and as well as our partners at the State Capacity Building Center, along with their additional early education TA partners. Participation in the communities of conversation is always voluntary. We will have available the select presentations that are communities of conversations that we have done on previously. They're always available on the Office of Child Care Technical Assistance website. If you go to that site and right now you click on Resources and Topic, you'll see PDG B-5 Technical Assistance Center there, and the resources that we've made available throughout 2019 are located at that site. This is an open discussion and dialogue. We do encourage states to ask questions as we go through the conversation today. There is the chat box. So as Sammy mentioned, for the time being, we have muted all the lines to try and keep down some of the extra noise that happens in the background sometimes. But we are monitoring the chat room and happy to bring along discussions and questions to both myself and the two presenters that we have today. Here's the agenda for today's conversation. I'll go through the strategic plan guidance. We'll have, as I mentioned, participant questions and discussions. Please send them as they occur to you. We'll talk about the newly released strategic plan Crosswalk, and that is an optional document that I'll talk about during today's presentation. We are very fortunate to have two grantees that have agreed to share with us some of their experiences as they're going through their strategic planning process. And I'll get to them in a few minutes. Amanda Varley, let me just go ahead and say that. Amanda Varley and Bobby Burnham, well, from Minnesota, and Deborah Anderson from Oklahoma. And so I'll be introducing them directly in a few slides. I'll also talk about the strategic plan submission process, just to remind you all one more time how that is working. We'll have some conversation takeaways, and we'll do some closing. We'll have a closing slide with some follow-up question and answer documents as they're needed. So first, let's talk about the strategic plan. The purpose of the plan is to develop or revise for those states that already had a plan in place prior to 2019. And that plan should support and facilitate collaboration and coordination among the existing programs of early childhood education, reflecting a B-5 mixed delivery system within a state or territory participating currently in this initiative. The plan will focus on establishing and maintaining an early childhood education system designed to support all children and families, but particularly those identified as most vulnerable by their state or territory. So the context for the plan, the strategic plan. The plan is based substantially on the needs assessment information that grantees have been in the process of completing since early 2019. Several states have completed their needs assessment process and have submitted those plans for review by the Departments of Health and Human Services and Education. In several cases, several plans have been accepted by both departments. The plan, the strategic plan, needs to reflect a comprehensive perspective on supporting children and families birth to 5. The plan should reflect and outline the stakeholders and partners that have been involved in providing input and collaboration from the mixed delivery system. The plan should reflect and speak to the parent's voice. The plan should address maintenance and sustainability of effort across the time span. And for some strategic plans, for those that have already been in existence, the plan that gets submitted would be to reflect a revision or an update from the original plan. And where that has happened, it's important to be reflected, what changes have been made. So Health and Human Services and Ed can see the input that's been received from the state from the needs assessment process and how that has impacted what was originally the state strategic plan and how that might have been updated. There are some expectations from both departments as states complete their strategic plans. They include that there's been a full range of stakeholders in the state engaged in the process. So in some cases, especially where plans were created initially prior to this funding opportunity being announced, and then as a result of the updated needs assessment process, that both departments will want to see reflected in what's submitted that there's been a broad inclusion of stakeholders and partners in the development of the state's strategic plan. The plan should lay out a clear plan with goals and action steps. The plan needs to address a comprehensive mixed delivery system and process. The plan also should identify the partnerships, the collaborations, the coordination of the variety of agencies and individuals and organizations that will play a role in implementing the state's going forward strategic plan for early childhood education. The plan should also include addressing quality improvements that may be made as a part of this comprehensive plan and how those quality improvements are being used to leverage policy alignments and program service delivery across the birth through age 5 system. And the plan should identify activities that address transition of children and families within and across systems and into the elementary school environment. So there are a series of dimensions to the plan that every state should pay attention to as they draft their document or documents. One is that the plan should delineate how states plan to build, support, and enhance improved coordination and collaboration. So as you craft the words for the plan, they should reflect, as the reader, the reviewer, looks at these plans, how they're building, supporting, and enhancing improved coordination and collaboration. And this is a good point for me to stop and say that we have all heard Richard clearly state that while what I'm going to talk about today is a strategic plan that grantees will submit to both departments for review, Richard wants to emphasize that these plans are intended for your state. While both departments will look to make sure that the strategic plan incorporates the required components as outlined in the funding opportunity that was awarded to states, Richard would also want to make sure that you all reflect that this is a plan that your stakeholders and partners and parents, agencies and organizations will be able to embrace as a part of their path, your path forward. So while both departments will review and accept your plan, he wants to make sure that this is a plan that you all are comfortable with and being very transparent and sharing with your stakeholders. So the second part of expectations of the plan is the framework. And the framework of the plan should reflect how the state addresses increased participation of children in quality early childhood education programs, services, and settings, again, across a mixed delivery system. And so mixed delivery should include things, elements such as family child care, home visiting, center-based programs, both public and private, profit and nonprofit, and LEA-based programs, those in child care subsidy system, and private entities, along with faith-based, by the way. The strategic plan should also include an assessment of any federal, state, and local statutory requirements that impact the plan and that may be barriers to the plan, and that a state may want to identify as a future policy leverage initiative that that particular state may need to address. The plan should also identify indicator data. It's important for states to reflect on how well they're going to be able to monitor the progress and journey on their strategic plan. And so both departments are going to look for indicator data points. What has the state identified as measurable points across the time span of the strategic plan that they'll be able to determine that they're making progress or not? And where they're not making progress, it would be a point in time for that state grantee to determine what they need to update, revise, and enhance to further the progress of the plan. So in that indicator data, how are they assessing progress? What are the desired outcomes? And what are the cost and resource efficiencies and continuous quality improvement elements that are a part of the plan? The last expectation on this slide is for the state to describe the continued involvement of the state's advisory council in whatever fashion that council has been established. So also critical to the completion of the plan is really its connection to the needs assessment process. A number of states we know have initiated the needs assessment process first as a part of this funding process, and some states are doing the needs assessment and strategic plan simultaneously. Departments, Health and Human Services and Education are looking, will be looking for linkages in the strategic plan with the information that came from the needs assessment results. So there will be looking for connections around what are the focal populations. The states have been asked to more definitively identify what are their vulnerable populations, and the connection of touching those focal populations in their strategic plan. The second is the quality, access, and availability of early childhood, early care and education programs across regions by demographics. So there is an awareness that there are differences in urban versus suburban versus rural settings, and how those different demographic settings, first of all, or geographic settings, impact the availability of quality care, and then demographics also along examples of things like racial or poverty characteristics, and how that may impact the quality and availability of services, and how the plan is going to address that. There has been much emphasis on trying to identify an unduplicated count in data. The information is being reported by states is as closely accurate as possible to the number of children and families that meet the characteristics of being vulnerable. Are there any gaps in quality and access? Are there any gaps in collaboration? And where those gaps were identified as a part of the needs assessment process, then how does the action steps or goals within the strategic plan addressing those particular gaps? I've mentioned already that there are measurable indicators of progress. So in the needs assessment initiative, states have identified which measurable indicators currently exist. And then in the strategic plan, there may or may not be a necessity to identify additional measurable indicators and the processes that a state would go about in collecting the data to measure that progress. Facilities was a component within the needs assessment, and states that identified that facilities were a need. The reviewers will look to where in the plan states are addressing the concept of facilities, and facilities may include the concept of not enough facilities, so is there capacity to address the broader, perhaps new definition of vulnerable children in a state, so is there capacity to meet all those children? Are those facilities of sufficient quality to ensure that those children enrolled in programs are receiving a quality early education experience? Are there any barriers to funding? That's often something that surfaces as a part of a needs assessment, and are there any plans strategically by a state to address those barriers in funding? Transition has been a dominant element as a part of this B-5 effort, most specifically focusing on that transition process between preschool and going into the elementary grades. Though we also are aware that there are a number of other transition points happening in that birth to 5 environment. Children moving from, for instance, birth to 3 home visiting programs into more center-based 3 to 5-year-old programs. Children moving across settings from infant to toddler room, from toddler to preschool. And in each of those situations, there are family components and elements related to assisting families making a smooth transition, as well as their children. Specifically, the funding application addressed the issue of preschool to elementary school transition. Finally, the last 3 bullets address the issues of identifying goals and action steps that may be needed, identifying goals and action steps for each of the domains, and addressing each domain in a narrative to reflect consideration of those areas. It is understood that through the needs assessment process, the state may identify that the particular domains that I just addressed, that there may not be any gaps in service, and so some additional work may not be necessary as a part of the strategic plan, but it will be important for a state to recognize that in their strategic plan, pointing that out, and they are welcome to do that within the body of the strategic plan, or they could do that in the executive summary, which I'll address in a few slides from now. Okay. So in terms of addressing that birth to 5 mixed delivery process, we're trying to emphasize, and the departments are trying to clearly help states understand that there's a broader system that truly impacts children and families. And so it's hoped that the scope of that plan addresses the system that supports young children and families. This graphic is identified and located in both the needs assessment and strategic plan guidance documents. So as you look at some of the elements of the system that impacts children and families, you see healthcare, behavioral health systems, support for children with disabilities and developmental delays, the broader early care and education system, child protection, economic assistance, and employment support systems, families. And each of those systems surrounds the basic structure of what supports programs for children and families, and those include elements of policy and governance, finance mechanism, data quality and linkages, the workforce, family involvement, transitions, as I've already discussed, quality assurance, and monitoring and evaluation. And this will be just a quick point to point out that in an earlier version of the needs assessment and strategic plan document, where it says monitoring and evaluation, it had said mentoring and evaluation, and that was a typo editing oversight on our part. So we have updated both the needs assessment and strategic plan documents to make sure that the elements as essential to this process are correct. The broader system should support a strong connection between all of these partners that you see in this graphic, and with continued attention to how the system elements are impacting the support. So how does policy, for instance, impact child protection? How does data quality impact economic assistance or the early childhood system itself? So this is a good time to pause. You've listened to me sort of talk for quite a long time, and We're fortunate enough to have today, as I mentioned, Amanda and Bobby from Minnesota. I think Amanda is mostly going to take responsibility for talking today. And Deborah Anderson also is going to join the conversation from Oklahoma. So I do have a graphic from Minnesota, but before I pull that up, I thought I could just first talk and ask. I've given a series of questions to both states to sort of have some preparation for the discussion today. And the first question, if you can both talk to this question, and then Minnesota, we could bring up your graphic. And the first question is, could you please talk about the process you used to start your state's strategic planning process? And so, Deborah, if you're on, maybe I could ask you first, and then we'll go to Minnesota second. And Deborah, if you're on, you need to, if you haven't, press *6 so we can hear you.
Yes, I think I just did that, so I hope that
Great.
you can hear me.
You. Super.
Perfect.
Glad to have you on board. Yes.
Great. So thanks for this opportunity. We have really been thoughtful, I feel, in how we have planned our strategic planning process so that we can ensure that we get community voice and parent voice into the plan. And that has been a bit time-consuming, but we also think it's been well worth our effort. So we started in our grant application, we proposed that we would host 8 strategic planning sessions in local communities, and we ended up deciding that we needed 11 because we felt that we should host at least 2 separate community conversations, as we call them, in Tulsa and Oklahoma City, because about 60% of the population in our state resides in those 2 metro areas. So we started out creating the structure for the planning sessions, and the way that we designed them is to create data walks. So we took indicators that we had identified on our needs assessment, and with the help of and the guidance of our contractor, the Urban Institute, who is helping us with both the needs assessment and strategic plan, we made data posters in 4 areas that align with some previous work that we had done through in Oklahoma for a school readiness pathway. So those 4 areas are services for infants and toddlers, 3s and 4s, health and mental health services, and then family support and education. So we had data that aligned with those 4, and we trained facilitators to help participants walk through the data posters, reflect on the data, think about one, what do those indicators tell us, and then how did that generate ideas and recommendations? And we found this to be a pretty powerful process. So the next thing we had to figure out is how we were going to get this to the community level and ensure that we had great participation from all of the key important players in communities, and then most importantly parents. So we developed a mini grant opportunity for organizations who resided in the 11 areas that we wanted to conduct the strategic planning community conversations. And their role then was to recruit participants, announce the locations. They had to provide 2 facilitators. They, as hosts, they welcomed the group, and we found that process of working together with them in the implementation of the community strategic planning conversations really helped with their participation and buy-in and ownership. So that was sort of the first step. We have some additional steps that I can share a little bit later if you want me to talk about those now. Jim, are you on mute? Hello? No?
Sorry, I was on mute. I have a tendency to do that. Yes, sorry. Yeah, so if you don't mind, you can keep going, and then we'll shift over.
Okay.
To,
okay.
So then I'll bring it back into how we are working with our state level partners. So after we generated this amazing feedback across our 11 sites, the Urban Institute took that data and has conducted some analysis on that to arrange the feedback according to some set goals as we have been crafting the strategic plan. So we're taking that feedback, and now we're in the process of generating strategies with our state level partners. And rather than hosting a day or two of a big strategic planning session, we're kind of stair-stepping into this with our partners. And so we have a couple of in-state consultants that created a questionnaire so that they could go individually interview key informants in the state about what they saw as important issues for Oklahoma to address in the future. That was a very productive process because we think we got a lot richer feedback by having those individual interviews. So we now are in the process of combining the community and the parent voice along with the key partners at the state level into a set of strategies that, as I speak, our steering committee is organizing those strategies into setting some priorities and identifying action steps that go along with those priorities. And so that's kind of where we are so far. It's been a very inclusive process, and then as we're going to go through several iterations of smaller work group meetings looking at those strategies in informing the strategic plan that will eventually be our next draft.
Great. Thanks so much, Deborah. Appreciate you sharing that information. So now I'm going to, we'll switch over to, I think it's Amanda, Minnesota. Great. Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
So we pulled up the graphic design that you asked that talks about your strategic plan process. So that's being shared right now.
Great. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity. Oklahoma, it's great to hear from you because I think a lot of the work that we're doing shares the same values and ways of thinking about approaching the needs assessment and strategic plan. So we are going through both of our needs assessment and our strategic planning process essentially concurrently. And so we've partnered with 10 different community organizations throughout the state. So 3 of them are American Indian organizations. 6 are from what we call Greater Minnesota, but those are the geographies outside of the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. And then 1 organization within the Minneapolis-St. Paul. And those organizations make up a planning and advisory committee along with state staff and other kind of key stakeholders throughout the state. And they're the group that has been advising us on our needs assessment and strategic planning process. And so you can see in the graphic how we've done it is each of those community organizations has been charged, they have a contract with us to conduct community engagement in their geographies. And so in that first round, they ask questions like, what do you consider when you choose to help care for or support your child and your family? Another question is, tell us a story about when you needed extra help with your child. What did you need and how did you get it? Another one is, if you had a magic wand, what supports would you need to make to support your family thriving? And so as you can see, a lot of the questions are really broad questions. And in those meetings, they really prioritize family voice, and then also those that are people who are American Indian, as well as people of color, and then others that are impacted by race, geography, and wealth inequities. And so in that first round of engagement, there were 79 events throughout the state, and those were conducted in 9 different languages. And we had over 900 people who participated in those. About 73% of the attendees were parents, but then they also reached public health, teachers, child care providers, advocates, and others, of course. And then we came back with those different communities came back to the Planning Advisory Committee, And we started making sense of that information together. And then now they just on Monday or Friday finished the second round of engagement. So going back out to communities and saying, does this reflect your values? This is what we heard. Does this reflect your values? Basically, did we hear you right? And then help us prioritize what we should focus on. So this is both working on making sure that we have the right information going into our needs assessment, as well as helping us starting to prioritize what should be focuses for our strategic plan. So on Wednesday, we meet with our community groups again in the Planning and Advisory Committee, and we start synthesizing that information. Of course, the data will take longer to put together, but that will give us the right information to both finalize our needs assessment and then really shape up that strategic plan. And then the plan is to share back our strategic plan in November and December. So our hope is to finish our strategic plan at the end of October. I'd say one challenge is, we have our needs assessment we're hearing all kinds of things. As you heard, we have these really broad questions, and so we're hearing information about housing, transportation, healthcare, including behavioral and dental health. And so we're really working with our partners, which is the who's leading our grants is Departments of Health, Education, and Human Services, to think through what are our guardrails for this strategic plan. And then how can we partner with our children's cabinet to lift up themes that may not be in the exact purview of our three agencies. So that's the community needs assessment and strategic planning process. At the same time, the state staff, we held a bunch of listening sessions with different task forces and councils, and so this is how we started reaching the audiences of kind of our advocates, our county leadership, our local officials, our people who work in healthcare, all these other categories of stakeholders. So they're contributed in that way. And we tried as much as possible to try to have the same people, the same individual people in each of these rounds of engagement, but Minnesota summers, people, they're not, if the weather is really great, people aren't going to show up to a meeting. I'll just say that. And so in this last round, we also had an opportunity with a survey as well to get feedback on how our strategic plan is going. So I can leave it there for now.
Great, thanks so much. I do agree. There are a lot of similarities across both states. It seems as though each of you have done a tremendous job at trying to tap into a diverse population of individuals, which is great, and to get that feedback and to bring that input together into some sort of fashion that you can then get that back out and get consensus across those diverse groups. I appreciate you sharing. A question that's come in, and neither of you specifically addressed it because I certainly didn't ask it in my questions, but it would be interesting to know, have either of you actively included your Head Start collaboration office and or their groups as a part of your planning process, and how did you do that?
This is Amanda from Minnesota. Go ahead.
Okay, Amanda?
It's Amanda from Minnesota. We have worked closely with our Head Start collaboration office, and so our Head Start, the state did these meetings with task forces and councils, these listening sessions, we had the opportunity to go, their parent policy leadership was having a conference at the same time, so that was one spot where we were able to reach out with them. And then I know each of our community grantees has also been reaching out to Head Start. So we have been able to work together throughout the process.
Excellent, thank you. How about Deborah?
Yes. So I'm very pleased to say that part of my work is to staff the Early Childhood Advisory Council, and Head Start is one of our required members on the board, although we'd have them on there even if they weren't required. And so we do work very closely at the state level with our collaboration office, and the director is involved in several of our, both our steering committee and two of our work groups, family and community engagement and professional development. But then with the mini grants that we offered across the state, several community action programs that house Head Start centers were the grantees. And what we liked about partnering with them to host the community conversations is that they were very helpful in being able to recruit families who were in some, participate in Head Start programs or other support services through the Community Action Program, so that we were ensured of getting their voice into the process.
Great. Thank you so much for both of you for sharing that. So I'm going to go back to the slides for a few minutes, and then Amanda and Deborah, I'm going to come back to you for another question or two. So if you don't mind holding on a bit. So let's look at the, first of all, we did get one question in before I go on to this next slide. Are you using the terms components and domains interchangeably? And this would be a good time to, if you don't have your needs assessments and strategic plan guidance documents available, make note because you'll want to do this. In the needs assessment guidance document, there's a table towards the back of the guidance document with a list of domains that were drawn directly from the funding opportunity application. And so those are, when I speak of the words domains, I'm addressing the domains that come from the needs assessment guidance document, which again were outlined and drawn directly from the funding announcement. The term components is drawn and refers you to the strategic plan guidance document, and there's a table towards the back of that strategic plan guidance document, which lists a series of components that were also outlined and identified in the funding application that were are expectations to be included in the strategic plan. So they are not being used interchangeably, but they do address two specific categories of information that is expected to be addressed. One in the needs assessment, one in the plan. Of course, ensuring that the plan is adequately addressing the domains that were originally listed in the needs assessment and funding application. So I hope that helps. The second question is regarding those categories and names. Can they be mixed together, combined? Can we use different words? I would say absolutely you can. What I would recommend, if you do combine them or do use different words, in a few minutes I will bring up the strategic plan crosswalk, and I would recommend, even though the crosswalk is optional, that if you do make some changes, that you use the crosswalk so that the reviewers, federal reviewers, are able to see those linkages. So if you interchange them, the crosswalk will provide opportunities for the reviewer to go to certain points in the document, and they'll be easily able to find them even if the words or names look different. So let's talk about managing the scope of the plan. You will need to identify the individuals and representatives that will be a part, and you heard the steps that Minnesota and Oklahoma has gone through to identify many of those individual partners. Very helpful to operate from your vision and mission, and that was mentioned. It's not necessary to be a part of the strategic plan, but there is some discussion about making sure that your needs assessment and strategic plan draw from the vision and mission that the state set as a part of its early childhood initiative. You need to identify the goals that address the domains you've identified within the plan, and any value-added strategic components as a part of that. Please make sure you have measurable progress indicators and or objectives that are a part of your strategic plan, letting Health and Human Services and Ed know how you intend to measure the progress that you'll make in your state. The sequence of strategies or action steps so that they make logical sense to those that are looking at your plan. It's helpful to identify the persons responsible and the collaborators. That is not an essential part of the plan, but as a part of your measurable progress, it's always recommended that there's some go-to people that have agreed to take some responsibility for the goals and or action steps that are listed in your plan. It's helpful to identify the resources that may be available and the completion dates. Again, that's not a requirement of the strategic planning process, but again, if you're identifying measurable progress indicators and outcomes, it would seem to be a little bit more difficult to determine progress unless you have set some dates, at least some monitoring dates to determine how successful you've been. In the strategic plan guidance document is a suggested sample outline for the strategic plan. This is not a requirement. The plan does not need to look like this. These are just some sample components that suggested you incorporate into your document, but you are free to create and develop your strategic plan that best fits the needs of your stakeholders and partners in your state. Again, this is just an optional suggestion, but you'll see that in the strategic plan document. The strategic plan should align with the plan components. As I've mentioned, if you go back and review those domains in the needs assessment, make sure they're addressed in some fashion. If you don't need to address any of those domains, it's helpful to highlight that and bring that out in your executive summary. The components, again, are listed in the table at the back of the strategic planning guidance document. Here's the crosswalk. This was just shared with you, I do believe, last week. I'm sorry for this is as small as it is, but trying to fit it all on one page. You will see the strategic plan domains or components that are listed there, stakeholder contributions, goals and action steps, partnerships, transitions, coordination and collaboration, framework for quality, statutory requirements, measurable indicators, and state advisory council. And then there's a table. There's actually two sections within the crosswalk. One is the strategic plan components, and the second one are the assessment needs assessment domains. And this is a suggestion. Again, this is an optional document, but especially if you decide to change the names or to combine, the crosswalk asks you to, for instance, where in a corresponding, using a page number in your strategic plan, does the plan address the stakeholder contribution process? Likewise, where in a corresponding number in the guidance document does your plan address measurable indicators? Unless the measurable indicators across the domain, the whole document itself, is if there's a particular section, or you can highlight and address that. Again, this is to assist the reviewers as they go through the process, and it is optional. This is just probably better eyesight. I probably should have went to this if I forgot I included this. Again, this is to assist you. Also, this can become a helpful checklist for yourself to make sure that the components and the domains that are required or expected to be addressed in your plan are included. The page number helps the reviewer. If you check it, at least you'll know that you've addressed those particular elements. So I'm going to go back to another question. I wonder either Amanda or Deborah, if you have a place where you can currently recognize in your even in the draft plan where you perhaps have taken a needs assessment result, something that a gap or something that needed to be addressed, and how you may have incorporated that into your current strategic planning process.
So this is Deborah. I'll start. I think what's been a common theme as our partners have gathered and thought about how we improve outcomes for young children in Oklahoma has been the impact of trauma and adverse childhood experiences in our state. And we hear that in all sectors as they talk about challenges with supporting families and young children. And so this theme has, crossed how center-based providers are able to keep children in placements, and do they have the right kinds of supports in order to be able to do that? How do they have the training that they need? And many of them say that behaviors seem to be more severe than they have been in years past in terms of dealing with challenging behaviors and struggles with engaging families as well through that process. Family child care home providers also talk about challenges with that, and as well as, just all across our system. So there's been a lot of work done around ACEs and resiliency, and people say, yes, we get it. We know that we have a lot of need for this. So what do we need to do about it? And that's really provided us a great opportunity to think about how we might address it. So we have been working with our Department of Mental Health and our health department that have long-standing early childhood mental health consultation networks. Those have predominantly been funded through our quality child care dollars to support consultation in centers that accept child care subsidies. We're talking about how we, first bring up the proficiency of our mental health consultants so that they have fresh training, and how do we build in stronger supports for them to have the types of reflective supervision that would help improve their ability to provide valuable consultation. And then how do we build that workforce in addition to improving the quality of the staff that we currently have? And then how do we just help provide that support broader across sectors? Many of our consultants kind of consult on the side, so they have a job to provide other types of services. And then, oh, by the way, if you have time, can you fit in providing some consultation? So we'd like to build a stronger network of individuals that are well-trained, well-staffed, well-supported, and that they can really hone in that skill and be able to provide consultation across a variety of networks and settings, be it in kinship homes or foster homes, helping home visitors, helping family child care homes, helping Head Start child care, pre-K, and really build that network up so that it's seen as a supportive mechanism that helps those providers, no matter what setting, really have access to that type of services and supports that help make them more successful.
Great. Thanks, Deborah. Appreciate
You
that.
bet.
Amanda, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I mean, if you're not there yet, you're welcome to share we're not there yet.
So mine's a little bit, it's kind of a meta thing. But one finding that's emerging from our process evaluation is actually our process for doing this type of needs assessment. And so we're learning that at the same time that we're going through this preschool development grant needs assessment, our colleagues at the Department of Health are conducting a very similar Title V
comprehensive needs assessment of the health of children, mothers, and families. And they're taking a very similar broad brush approach. So and then at the same time in our process evaluation, we've heard from some communities that are over-asked what they need. And we've heard from other communities who said, thank you for coming and listening to my story. And so one thing that we're learning from the needs assessment process that will show up into our strategic plan is really how do we go about this work and have really intentional feedback loops with community and work together across different programs and funding streams to do and share those learnings with one another as well. So a roundabout finding that we weren't really expecting, which has been exciting for us.
Great. Thanks so much, Amanda. I appreciate it. So thanks for the two of you. To everybody else on the phone, I've really put them on a spot, so I appreciate each of you stepping up to the plate and sharing. Before I go on, a few more slides. We did have another question, which is a great relevant question to be asked, and that's from Maggie. The needs assessment domains encompass a great deal of information. And is it acceptable for the plan to triage findings, meaning the plan's addressing certain things now, and the plan committee will choose to revisit other needs assessment findings in the future? And it's absolutely fine, as my understanding, to triage that information. I think what's critical would be to highlight that either in the body of the plan or probably most helpful in the executive summary. So the departments want to know that that each state is cognizant of the domains and the components that need to be addressed, and if they're not relevant at this point in time, or there are no particular needs, say relative to facilities as an example, that a state can simply say, there are no significant gaps in facilities at this time, and we will continue to monitor the quality of facilities to make sure that they remain high for future children that get identified or being part of the service, just so that the feds understand that you've not overlooked a domain or component, and it's fine to address that either it's not an issue or it will be an element that you'll address in the future. Absolutely. Good question. So just quickly to review the submission plan summary, make sure each plan should include a cover page and an executive summary. As I mentioned, identify where the reviewer can locate the evidence of each domain and related bulleted point. Address all domains or components and recommendations, and if you're not addressing them all in particular, in a more expanded format, identify in the executive summary those particular areas that will either don't need attention at this time, or you'll hold on to those issues for future. And as I've mentioned, if no immediate plan is action, make sure you say that. It would be certainly optional, but if you would like, please feel comfortable in sharing the draft with your TA specialist for feedback. We're happy to review those drafts and give you feedback before you submit it formally to your federal project officer. And your plan should go to Richard Gonzalez, your federal project officer, your TA specialist, and your regional OCC office specialist. So those 4 individuals should be included in your submission. I see I have 1 minute left. If you do continue to have questions around your plan, please feel comfortable to contact either your federal project officer or your TA specialist. Just to highlight tomorrow, there will be a community of conversation on Tuesday, August 27th at 3 o'clock. And the topic, well, it'll first be hosted by the Early Childhood Technical Assistance Center. And the focus will be exploring the availability of IDEA 619 and Part C data that you can bring in as a part of your needs assessment process. You will see www.surveymonkey.com/r/PDG B-5 CoC. We welcome your feedback on this community of conversation today. Special shout out to Amanda and Deborah, Amanda from Minnesota and Deborah from Oklahoma, for graciously agreeing to be a part of the conversation today and highlighting the unique elements of your state. I know that your colleagues are very appreciative of your willingness to share your information today. If you have further questions, you could see PDG B5TA at atlasresearch.us, but most of you have your TA specialist email. Thank you all for being on the line today. Thank you for your questions. Special shout out to my colleagues at Atlas, Sammy, Kesley, and Evelyn, for helping manage the Adobe process behind the scenes. We couldn't have done it without you. And I see it's 4:01, so we're going to end our conversation today. Thank you very much, and please remember to contact your specialist if you have more questions.